So it stands for Structure of Observed Learning Outcomes. So it's the whole structure is to try and see what students are doing in your lesson and seeing if they're working up from shallow to deep learning. And it makes it really visual, really apparent that students are working from shallow learning at the start up to deep learning at the end. And when I've used it in my lessons for the topics that I've done, and I'll show you some examples in the second part, kids have come into my lesson knowing nothing and then ended up being right at the very top and can link other things in and so on. They've really developed their thinking and understanding because of it. So it's a really, really, really good way of doing it. I won't read through these as you go, but there's some of the other things which it does. With Sean, we've looked at it in a music context, at just looking at planning, seeing how it could develop your planning and make sure that in your lessons, just as a bit of a recap, that you are going from shallow to deep learning. But the best thing, obviously, is if you start sharing it and get students in on the act and start learning the terms and that sort of thing, and you use these rubrics in your lessons, and and it's all differentiating outcomes on there and that sort of thing, which is really quite easy to do. Then obviously it makes the progress in your lessons so much more clearer, and it allows students to see what they need to do to get to the next level, which is obviously really powerful, because how many times do we hear in some of our staff meetings that students need to know where they're at, but obviously what to do to move forward. Well, I've already listed on here some of the things we need to do as teachers to move forward to the next level. So if you do that for your lessons, it again is a really powerful tool, and students can see that. Thrives on AFL and so on. It's great for students to post-it note, reflect, write a little brief summary about why they're at certain levels and that sort of thing, which works really, really well. And like I said, it's the whole thing about moving students through this deeper learning and trying to get to the highest end of the end, which I'll explain in a second. With the differentiation bit, there's something very complicated I did a couple of weeks ago, which I'll talk about. But you can even, like, with these rubrics and so on, when the kids come into a lesson, you can have them all start at different points of a lesson, and still they can work their way up. So you can have lots of differentiation going on in your groups. And it is quite easy to manage because it's all structured there and scaffolded for them, which is good. All the success criteria, again, really, really help. And like I said, all the self-assessment things work good. The last bit at the bottom, I did this a bit secretly with my Year 11 group in the last couple of months before their Year 11 exams, to try and help them structure their exam question answers, because in the final section of our exam there's some 8-mark questions they've got to do. And they're really quite deep, and they need students to really not just talk about that particular topic, but link in other aspects as well. And when we used this, they were going from sort of like a 2 out of 8 mark questions to full 8 out of 8 mark answers, because they were using the methods that I taught them, and were bringing in different things and working up the stages and including it all in their answers. So it's really, really good to help develop that as well. And I know on the internet and so on, when I've chatted to other people, loads of departments are using that. English, I know, are using it quite a lot in other schools as well. So I thought I'd go through and explain exactly what all the different levels are and when a student might actually be at these levels in your lesson. Now the first one, the little dot at the bottom, is what we call the pre-structural. And that is when, if you're doing a topic, so for instance in my PE lesson I was doing something on somatotyping, some of my kids will come in and go, what? I don't know what you're talking about. So they will automatically be at pre-structural level. They're not sure about this topic, and they don't know anything about this subject. So some of you already, when you came in here, said, oh, I'm already at the bottom level, pre-structural. So that's where you're at. And actually, that's a really powerful thing to have at the start of your sessions, because the kids can then make the most progress, because they've started knowing nothing. At the end of your lesson, actually, do you know what? I've moved up like 4 levels, and I'm up to here now, and I can see how it is and what I've done. So it's a really, really good starting point to get going. So like I said, a lot of the new topics we do, a lot of the students naturally just end up at the pre-structural level. It's really good. And obviously the visual dot, like a full stop, not knowing much, it is really helpful as well. In a minute as well, as we go up, there's going to be a list of verbs as well, which are really helpful when at those levels you use those sorts of words as well. So acts is a bit peculiar. And I'll send you this a link to this PowerPoint, this Prezi as well, so you can see it in your own time. The second level is what we call the unistructural. So in your lessons, obviously you then start giving bits of information, you start doing the teaching and start sharing the topic content. If a student only actually knows one bit of content from your topic, either because they weren't listening or because that's what you've covered, then they're at what we call the unistructural level. They've only learned one thing. I have one idea about this topic, but this is the time when they're gathering pieces of information. So at the end of your lesson, if you go, right guys, so what do we say about somatotyping? And one kid turns around and says, I know there's something about muscles and mesomorph, but they only know one thing. So they've ended up at a unistructural level. I haven't actually moved them up the taxonomy. I need to obviously work on that a little bit later. But I then know that one child in my class, next lesson I need to work them a bit harder and obviously do so and so. So it informs my planning as well. So That's when a student knows one particular fact about something. Obviously, if as the lesson goes on, you're given lots of these different facts, they've gathered lots of facts. And the next level is what we call the multi-structural. The learner outcomes show connections, but no significant overall meaning is brought together. So they know, for instance, that somatotyping has got something to do with muscles and body shape, and I think something's called a mesomorph and that sort of thing. They know all these individual facts, but they don't know how they all link together. So they're still gathering information. So I know several things about this topic, but they're gathering multiple pieces of information, but not able to see how they all work together. So I've taught them all the little bits they need, but I haven't brought it together. They don't know what the bigger picture is. And obviously, this is a great stage to get the students at. This is the bit where obviously we're sharing our knowledge and so on. And again, we've got some different verbs on the side there, like define, describe, things like that. And I know in our topic, we've got to give lots of definitions, and that's great. But then they need to show what these definitions mean, and we need to take it to the next level, which I'll show you in a second. But it's all about these connections. They're not major connections. They've just got all these little facts. Next stage after that, this is the bit, the sort of the important bit, the pivotal bit in any lesson, and that's where obviously we then say, right, you know this about this, that about that, that about that, but now we bring it all together. What's the bigger picture? Okay, so in my lesson I've talked about somatotyping, which I know a lot of people here won't know about, and a lot of my students won't know about when they first meet it, and they know it's something to do with muscles and body shape and something called a mesomorph, but now they can all tie it together. Oh, somatotyping it's about the body shape, and a really muscular person who's got a big muscular frame, they'd be called a mesomorph. So they've linked all these ideas together, they can see how they all join up and that sort of thing. And again, it's all these different key verbs down the side there as well, which all the analysing words and explaining and classifying and putting things in sequences and order, see how they all work together, how it all ties together. And the key things at the bottom I put down there is the relationships, the key points and how they all interlink. Which makes the relational level probably the key part in our lesson. Now, I'll talk about how we did it with one of Sean's lessons as well, but the next stage is a little bit different. The next stage is where you really push and stretch the students to sort of like the bit beyond what I normally taught.
It's okay, it's for me.
All right, so the final stage on the ladder is what we call the extended abstracts, and that is where we are really challenging and developing the knowledge of our students. Okay, this is where we get to look at things in a different way, and Sean's going to talk about in a minute how he did it in his music lesson which he was doing. But for instance, I watched, I don't know if Chris is in as well, Learn Inspire doing his talk at Teach Me Cleveland about how he's doing the taxonomy, but he said that when he did his example, he was talking about volcanoes and how kids know individual facts about volcanoes, but when you put them together and that sort of stuff, about they've got lava and that sort of thing, and they form like peaks and that sort of stuff. But right at the very end, it's where you get to think differently, like, well actually, what was if lava didn't come out, but water came out instead? And that sort of stuff. And that then, you're now talking about erosion and stuff like that, so you change it and trying to develop their topics a little bit more. Or something that we've done in our lessons, so we then go and link to other topics as well. So in my last lesson I did a physiology thing, we were talking about the muscular system, but then I said, well actually, how does that work with the skeletal system? And I'd never done that before with a group. I've just taught skeletal, or the muscular, or the heart, and that sort of thing, but I linked it together, and then my students go, oh actually, the muscles then do this, and that does that. So we're bringing in additional topics as well, and it's developing a wider knowledge of the topic that I'm covering. And that's a really, really, really critical bit, actually. That's where we're pushing our A stars and our A students, because they can bring in other knowledge and so on in their exam questions and things like that. But like I said, that's just a little summary. It's about rethinking it in a different way, or bringing in other topics and seeing how things link to other areas as well. So, now, I'm using Bloom's, I'm using the Accelerated Learning Cycle, but I just want to go over why this has been just mind-blowing and just a difference in the level of my lessons quite quickly. Like I said, the bit versus Bloom's taxonomy, Bloom's is great, okay, obviously remember and understanding all the way up to creation and that sort of thing, but The problem is, in my lessons, I've never had a student, when I've used it, go, "Sir, I've just finished my analysing task, what can I do for my evaluating?" They've never done it. It's not been a natural jump. One stage doesn't freely move to the next one very easily. It's quite confusing for some of the students. Whereas, with using this, with the taxonomy level, they know nothing, they know one thing, they know a group of things, they know how they link, and they can then link them all together and actually extend it beyond this topic and link something else in as well. So it actually comes together. Yeah, it's cool. So it actually comes together, and it's a really, really easy structure for the students to learn and build upon the next thing. And they can easily look at one of these and see what it is they need to do to get to the next level. And they don't even have to ask me now. They can say, "What do I need to get to model structural?" Well, they can look at it, okay, because it's written down there already for them to go. Again, it makes it really easy and clear for progress. They can see they're moving up, visually see, and there's nothing better for a student when they're actually, they know that they've moved up 3 levels in your lesson on the taxonomy, okay, to link it in. Peer assessment, the best word I've ever learnt this term, really simple, feed forward, okay. Again, Ria at staff meetings is saying, "I know what they've done, but I need students to tell me what they need to do to move on the level." Well, it's all structured here again. It says what they need to do in this particular topic to get to the next stage. And because I'm sharing it with students, they can read that and see what it is they need to do to get to the next stage. So if anyone has that conversation with them, you, parents, learning leaders coming in and doing quick spot checks and so on, that student can turn around and go, "Well, I've done this, but what I need to do to get next is do this." And they can actually link it in a lot better. They're the 3 questions which obviously have come out from the thing as well. What am I learning? What do I need to do to develop deep understanding and things like that? And I know it is a bit funny with multi-structure, extended abstract and that sort of thing, but once you learn it, it's actually really quite clear for the students. They can actually, it's only 5 extra words they've got to learn, or 5 phrases they've got to learn. If you kind of embed it in your lessons and so on and have displays and so on, it makes it quite easy.